There's a lot of interest in the teacher as the reflective practitioner, and that's because it's a means of achieving best practice. So we have to consider why best practice. What is best practice? Well, best practice is important because the 21st century is a different century in which we ourselves were educated, and therefore the needs of children in the 21st century are changing. We need to constantly think and rethink what we're doing in the classroom. What children need in the 21st century is something which is going to help them survive better and thrive more in this new global technological environment. And the reflective practitioner has a means through achieving best practice to help their students, help children achieve their dreams. The opportunities, therefore, that can be given to children are dependent on the reflective practitioner achieving the best practice, the best approaches that they can in the classroom. So, what does best practice look like? What are we actually talking about? What is best practice? How would we identify a classroom where the best practice is easy to see? Well, one thing to consider is that a best practice classroom is one where students are on task for very much of the time. They are engaged in the process of learning. We can also think of a best practice environment as one where teachers are collaborating and working together on tasks, very realistic tasks, which place students at the center of learning, or in other words, student-centered learning. And perhaps most importantly is that the best practice environment is an activity-based classroom. And this is a phrase which teachers use a great deal these days. And a very important aspect of this new 21st century learning of the best practice environment are classrooms which are environmentally and important learning spaces, or in other words, conducive to learning. So let's consider some best practices of teachers. One best practice is that the teacher will educate the whole child. A math teacher, for example, won't just teach maths, but is aware of the child as a whole learning individual and their needs for learning and their interests for learning. And so therefore teaching is not only based on the knowledge of the subject, but on the knowledge of how children develop and learn. Another core best practice is to think of preparing children for success, not only in school in terms of academic achievement, but also in later life. And we should also consider that best practice is about providing an environment which is enriched, or in other words, one where children can really thrive from a mixture of approaches and resources. Another core best practice is to think of students as active participants in the learning process rather than as passive observers, and a learning environment which provides challenge but also is very rigorous in terms of what students are learning. Some bad practices, for example, worse practices, teachers who plan and teach in isolation without collaboration, teachers teaching simply so students pass the test, and teaching one subject in the same way to all students. Teachers who teach without assessing students' needs so that some students may get left behind, and teachers who don't challenge themselves and stay within their own comfort zone is also considered to be not the best practice. Teachers who say in label only that they are using student-centered and activity-based practices. This is another aspect of what we would consider not best practice. And we can talk about operationalizing these best practices simply by thinking of the teacher as a reflective practitioner. The teacher, therefore, needs to be concerned really about the consequences of teaching, the long-term consequences on the child, not just about passing the test or getting through the curriculum. They need to be prepared to experiment and try out unfamiliar things in the classroom. This is another aspect of best practice. And the reflective practitioner, who we can see is using best practice, has an approach which is very open and honest and is wholeheartedly about the student. The best practice practitioner is committed to dialogue with others, talking, collaborating with peers, and sharing understanding and acquired knowledge. And also the best practice practitioner is someone who focuses on action and evaluating and revising what they're doing regularly on an ongoing basis. And perhaps most importantly, the reflective practitioner, who can be seen to be one who is using best practice, is themselves a lifelong learner. So reflective practice develops all of these skills potentially, and so in the classroom we can see best practice.